from the BBC World Service in association with ABC and All India Radio. This is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell in Melbourne, lucky enough to have now experienced lockdown in 2 different countries. It was only a 5-day affair in Melbourne, so I have nothing to complain about, particularly knowing how long the winter lockdown has been going on for in the UK. This still means some state borders are closed, so I'm not sure if I'll get across to my family in Adelaide for a while. Depends on case numbers. But I have, if you're wondering where I was the last couple of weeks, been swapping cricket balls for tennis balls, although I was, you'll be glad to know, still able to talk about an outswinger in commentary at the Australian Open, just off a serve instead of a bowler's delivery.
Ali, you're going well. Better than Serena Williams and Ash Barty from the sound of it. So I hope you've been enjoying yourself. It's all pretty freewheeling in Sydney, and we're getting on with Sheffield Shield, all sorts of excitement. The Victorians got Steve Smith out cheaply, but Nathan Lyons run rampant. Oh, it's all very exciting here as the Sheffield Shield season clicks on until April, I think. So there's a lot to look forward to.
I just checked in the mirror, and both of you will be glad to know that I noticed no more egg on my face after India bounced back in that second test match and evened it all up. So the series is very well poised, although I do suspect that the pink ball might bring fresh challenges to the Indians. We'll see about that a little later. And also a quick mention that the IPL, of course, continues to ensure that, of course, some of the usual suspects and a few surprises continue to have a lot of gravy along with their cricketing bread. So that's gone on well.
Charu, you will be glad to know that we're going to start with the fallout from an emphatic 317-run win for India's men over England in that second test in Chennai. It does, as you said, leave the series delicately poised at 1 apiece with 2 to play. And the third test, starting Wednesday in Ahmedabad, is a day-night affair. I'll actually quote you, Charu. Your final words on last week's podcast were, "You can hear all about India's fight back next time." So, yes, you were spot on. You didn't have to be Nostradamus, though, perhaps, to see which way that one was going. Yeah. But there has been a lot of debate in the aftermath about the state of the Chennai pitch. Well, it wasn't even in the aftermath, it was while the match was even ongoing. Well, here's what England captain Joe Root has had to say about it.
I say it was a challenging wicket, and I do think that the toss was an important one to win, but it wouldn't have guaranteed us to win the game either. India have showed that you can score runs on it, and they're very different to what a lot of our guys will have experienced before. But as long as we learn from it, we'll be a better side in the future.
OK, so Joe Root says, yes, challenging. We've had the Indian captain Virat Kohli saying that conditions were challenging for both sides, but he said that India showed more application, grit and determination to battle it out. Charu, a fair assessment?
Well, Alison, I think everybody involved with the match keeps using the term challenging, and everybody not involved with the match is busy criticizing it. We'll have to settle for that because, yes, the conditions were not what many teams are used to, especially those who don't play in India. But the last I remember, there was somebody who scored 160 odd in the first innings, despite the pitch, and the Indians did rather well. And a spinner who's not normally known for scoring big runs, although he's got 4 centuries before this, scored 100 in the third innings as well. So just on an overall basis, you look at the pitch and it explodes every time the ball lands on it. But the Indians, we'll have to admit, did use the conditions a lot better. You can argue that they were home conditions, but you don't play on such pitches every day either. So maybe just their spin contingent was better, their application was better, who knows? Because when you're not used to such conditions, you see much more devil in such conditions. And perhaps that's what undid the English batsmen.
Jim, poor pitch or poor England batting? What say you?
Oh, it wasn't a great pitch. I mean, it was going through the top on the first day, and it was amazing to watch Rohit Sharma play. I mean, there's no doubt in those conditions, England were outskilled by India's batsmen. And in terms of the bowling, India's spin was so much better. India's bowling had the variety that England didn't have. Moeen Ali looked short of a gallop and wasn't able to produce enough consistency or variation to really worry India often enough. And Leach is still learning his trade. So in those challenging conditions as described by Charu, England were much outplayed. I don't think it was a great pitch at all. But it wasn't what you'd call boring to watch, was it?
The question this does draw out, though, is it sufficient, if this was a poor standard pitch for Test cricket, Is it sufficient to deduct points or apply demerit points to the venue, or, as some have suggested, should teams be deducted World Test Championship points for preparing poor pitches?
We don't want a perfect world, let's put it that way. We want to be a bit imperfect. And it struck me that although the pitch was awkward and difficult, India managed to produce a lot of skill on it, which made the difference.
Now, the other major talking point from this test was England's decision to make 4 changes to the side just 3 days after winning the first test in such dominant fashion. And of course, there are more changes to come because Moeen's leaving the camp and returning home ahead of the day-nighter. But former England captain Michael Vaughan has been less than impressed with England chopping and changing.
I just don't understand this scientific approach to selection. How they're not being flexible to keep players there that have suddenly done something. I just don't quite understand why a series like India away, which is such a huge series in the Test calendar, you would be swapping and changing your side so much. I don't quite get that.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Jim, you said last week that England shouldn't rest players who are in form, James Anderson in particular. Do you think they're trying to be too scientific when it comes to selection?
Well, I don't know about scientific, but I think they've got to apply the law of common sense a bit more into the selection and need to be more flexible. I understand that they need to rest players and to leave Jimmy Anderson out when he's going to have about 10 days off before the following game, it seemed a surprise to me, but they cast these decisions in stone before they even got to the test match. So, if that's the way they're going to play it, well, they live with the consequences if it doesn't come off, I suppose. And now they're faced with an awkward situation of what would be their best 11 out of 17 names I saw thrown up before they make a decision for the Ahmedabad Test match.
In Charu, I could always foresee it happening that as regards this pre-laid out plan of sending some players home and resting and rotating, that, a player does well, they're due to go home, and yet you kind of don't want them to go because they've just had a brilliant test match. I mean, do they need to have more of a flexible approach?
Well, the simple answer is yes, but I just wonder if this is just a COVID times kind of policy because they're hoping that people will remain fresh and not stressed out because of bubbles and so on and so forth. I can't imagine that this would be a regular policy, even though Australia, Jim, had a bit of a rotation policy going back some time. But it depends, Alison, on what cricket boards are prioritizing. Are they prioritizing winning, or are they focusing more, as is the want these days, of player health and safety and mental issues and keeping everybody kind of light and easy? I have no doubt that the majority of the players would not want to be left out of a contest if they are on the top of their game, because it's difficult enough, really, to succeed.
A question about Virat Kohli to you both. So I felt we saw something of a different, maybe more aggressive Captain Kohli. In this second test, you saw him arguing with umpires. He was told off for walking down the pitch at one point. Is this Kohli back to his normal, fairly abrasive self, or was any of that a bit too aggressive for you, Charu?
Well, he's back. All right, that's the clearest answer. Kohli is back, and thankfully he got some runs as well, which was the key. Because otherwise, there's all that aggression and nothing to back it up on the field. He was certainly smarting after losing that first test match. I don't think India expected to be so badly beaten. So when he saw the openings in the second test, I think he kind of, of course, got his mojo back, if you can call it that. I think that crossing the pitch matter was just once when he ran across taking a third. But arguing with the umpires, that's not good cricket. So somebody needs to sort of calm him down and say, you win or lose, but you don't lose your cool with the umpires. That, there's no excuse there. So I wonder if somebody's going to have a word with him on that front.
Yes, they should. It sounds as though the match referee is not interested in doing anything about it, so the matter will rest. But he gets a bit excited. I'm not sure that I like him standing there revving up the crowd. Come on, keep cheering. I don't like that either. But this is his personality, and I like to reflect more on the quality of his batting, as I said before.
Could probably be a little more role model-esque in terms of his dealing with the umpires. But let's talk about the next test match upcoming, because it is the day-nighter at the Motera Stadium in Ahmedabad, which you'll remember we featured on Stumped a couple of weeks ago because it's newly built as the biggest cricket stadium in the world. So, Charu, first up, ball and conditions. It's a pink SG ball. England won't have played with one before. Do you think the conditions, though, under lights, will suit them more than India if there is some swinging seam to be found?
I would like to think yes, without question. I think the pink ball will ensure that the faster bowlers get into the act. Pound for pound, I think the England fast bowlers are a better squad team in terms of fast bowlers, and I think the pink ball is likely to help. So India might be in for a much bigger fight than they thought because of agreeing to a pink ball test at home, because the Indians are certainly not anywhere near as used to a pink ball, regardless of whether it's SG or any other make. So it's going to present a few challenges. I just feel that England, this could be their big comeback.
I'd like to know what the pitch is going to be like. Is it going to have a bit of grass on it? I mean, what are we talking about here? Because the problem for the pink ball is that you don't have conditions that are conducive to a bit of movement. I just think it's all predicated on what sort of surface it's going to be, and you'd have to suspect that it'll probably turn at some stage. I mean, it'd be silly of India not to have a pitch that helps their spin bowlers.
If it wasn't meant to help the spin bowlers about a week ago, it'll certainly have been now turned around to a pro spin track. But, it's all up in the air, actually, in a sense, because the stadium, of course, is brand new, and the square hasn't really been used for too much so far in terms of 5-day cricket. So it would be something that the authorities in Ahmedabad would not be very fond of in case, once again, it's termed as an under-prepared pitch. So I'm guessing it'll be far more of a better contest between bat and ball. So with the pink ball thrown in for additional mystery, it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen in the first test at Ahmedabad, as in the third test, but the first one at Ahmedabad.
From the BBC World Service, this is Stumped on All India Radio.
Well, moving from red ball to white ball cricket now, because world champions England's women are preparing to play 50-over cricket for the first time in over 14 months. They take on New Zealand in a 3-match ODI series starting in Christchurch on Tuesday. Their last ODI series was against Pakistan back in December 2019. I'm delighted to say England captain Heather Knight is with us now. Welcome to Stumped, Heather.
Hi, everyone.
Tell me, have you stayed this side of the world because you played WBBL before Christmas, or did you go back to the UK and go back again to New Zealand?
No, I managed to get back. So I think the WBBL finished at the start of December. And yeah, I think we've probably left the UK at quite a good time, to be honest, because obviously things are pretty grim back home. We've been so lucky to be out here and get back to playing international cricket, but also to be able to live like a normal human being is, so amazing after obviously what everyone is going through back home in the UK.
Hi, Heather. Just a quick word perhaps on the Indian girls. I really feel for them. So just to put on record, the fact that they haven't played for so long now. Just your thoughts on how they're getting along in terms of doing better internationally, because they've gotten so close to a couple of crowns and failed in the final. But do you think they are indeed getting better? How do they rate for you?
Obviously, they did brilliantly in the 20-over World Cup in Australia in March, but they haven't played for a year, which is crazy, really. And a real shame, I think, for the world gamer. I think COVID has probably exposed a little bit the difference in how boards support their women's team, and it's a real shame that India, along with a couple of other countries, haven't played too much. But I think they've got a tour against South Africa coming up, which is good. With the World Cup coming up next year here in New Zealand, you want teams to be playing. Even from an England perspective, you want a strong international game to create a really good product. And I think definitely they have improved. They've got some really world-class players now. Some of them that I've had the pleasure to play with as well, which has been really nice. And getting the world game more competitive is going to be really key in terms of pushing the women's game forward in the future.
Well, just getting back to the series here, of course, do you feel, despite the fact that there was some amount of cricket played by the English girls in the BBL, that you are at a distinct disadvantage because New Zealand had their cricket open all the way through their summer? How does that state with you?
I think that's the way of the world at the moment, and you have to accept that your preparation isn't going to be perfect. I think I've certainly learned to be more adaptable as a cricketer, and you're not going to get the perfect preparation in terms of COVID times. I think you could say the same for the West Indies that came over to England to play against us this summer. They were definitely undercooked. They hadn't trained or played very much at all, and we've obviously had a few games in terms of the English summer and our domestic competition. So it obviously works both ways, and I'm hopeful that those two competitive warm-up games that we've had and a slightly longer preparation in terms of a training camp here in Queenstown is going to help us be ready for that first one-dayer.
We've been talking a lot about the rest and rotation policies that England men and other teams are having to employ at the moment, just to protect, for the physical and mental well-being because of COVID and isolation, and you all did your quarantine. Is any of that something that you're having to think about in the women's setup, or are you, in a sense, like not playing enough cricket for that to be a real concern at the moment?
Yeah, we obviously experienced bubble life in Derby in the summer. It is manageable, but it's not particularly interesting and not particularly fun. And I think looking after the girls' mental health was really key during that, I think. We've obviously been quite lucky. We're here in New Zealand, which is a place where we're not confined to a bubble, bar the quarantine period of 2 weeks. And we haven't had a huge amount of cricket. We haven't played international cricket since September. So at the moment, it's not an issue for us. But obviously, we've got a huge year coming up. I was looking at the calendar earlier, actually, and it's going to be a very busy year. We obviously don't know yet where we'll be playing that cricket. Will it be in a bubble? Will it be some sort of semi-bubble, or will it be normal? So I think worst comes to worst, if we have to live in bubbles for long periods of time. We've got 2 series this summer coming up, international series and obviously the 100 as well, and a few big tours in the winter. So I think it's something we may have to look at if we're in the worst case scenario and we do have to be confined to a bubble, although obviously we're hopeful that won't be the case.
Yeah, and clearly it's good to hear that as an England team you've got a busy schedule ahead of you. Charu absolutely highlighted the fact that a country like India hasn't played, and soon it'll be March the 8th, won't it, of your whole year since that incredible T20 World Cup final at the MCG. So I think certainly that's something which will need to change. Well, that's it for this week's Stumped here on All India Radio. You can stay in touch with us on Twitter via @BBCWS Sport and use the hashtag BBC Stumped. Thanks to my co-hosts Charu, Sharma and Jim Maxwell, and to you for listening. Join us again next time. Bye-bye.
Stumped is a BBC sport production for the BBC World Service in association with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and All India Radio.